Hello and welcome to the Pink Pineapple Podcast, where we peel back femtech and take a bite out of more than just the juicy bits.
I'm Claudia, and I'm Emma's partner in Pineapple for this adventure.
And I'm Emma. Together, we're exploring women's health across the full timeline, from first periods to menopause and everything in between.
Each week, we'll dive into the stories, science, and software shaping the future of women's health. From hormones to hardware, fertility to femtech founders.
Think of us as your slightly nosy best friends who just happen to be doctors with a healthy curiosity for innovation.
We'll be chatting to clinicians, creators, and changemakers. And yes, asking the questions you actually want answered.
So whether you're out for a walk, cooking dinner, or hiding from your to-do list, join us as we get curious, clinical, and occasionally controversial.
This is the Pink Pineapple Podcast,
where women's health meets what's next.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pink Pineapple Podcast. And actually, in truth, this is our first episode that we ever recorded. And I want to introduce you to today's pineapple. This is today's pineapple. Here she is. I'm hoping by the time that we air this particular episode, she will have a name. We will try and get some social media sort of input into giving her a name. But for those that aren't watching us, she's got a wonderful purple feathered tiara with a large purple stone and a rose in her hair because she's celebrating our first ever recording. So yeah, here she is. What are your thoughts?
She's Fabulous. A real credit to you, Claudia. I think you've done a fantastic job. I think she's going to be designing the spin-off. This podcast is all a cover-up for the fact that she wants to be becoming like the Dolce & Gabbana for pineapples. Don't be fooled.
It's very kind of you. It's very kind of you. However, it's dreadful. And as I was discussing in the past, as I discussed on social media, I had all these grand plans that it was just all going to be really smart and rather beautiful and not too tacky. And I don't know if I'm succeeding. But I'm hoping that with every episode, they will get better. So we're going to be going backwards. Probably the first episode, people see it will be fabulous. And then they'll get to this one, they'll be like, poor show. But now you know why. And shall we be honest, Emma? Shall we be honest about this recording, it being actually take 2?
This is take 2, everyone. And we've learned some lessons along the way. We would always say, if I'm wondering if I can use this for the reflective part of my portfolio. I'm not going to lie. We always have to take the positives out of these situations. But the learning for us today is headphones are an essential.
Headphones.
Yeah.
If you ever want to do a podcast, put headphones, because otherwise you get an echo. And for the life of us, Riverside, no matter, how fancy and schmancy it is, it can't get rid of the echo.
It was like we were at a party, wasn't it? With about 50 people, which wasn't the vibe we were going for.
Anyway, we're ready. We're mic'd. We are headphoned. Let's take it away with today's episode.
And we have the wonderful Jenni Dowley, who has the patience of a saint and is back on with us to do round 2. She is a physiotherapist by background, and she is revolutionizing bone health with Building Bones, her new app. And she is now physio/health tech founder. And it'd be great, Jenni, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Building Bones.
Hi. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on for the second time. So yeah, I'm a physiotherapist by background. I've had a special interest and specialised in bone health over the kind of last 5-6 years. And Building Bones is essentially an application that aims to empower individuals with the tools that they can improve their bone health. So personalised programs through exercise, education, lifestyle, nutrition, trying to take a holistic approach to helping people to reduce their fall and fracture risk, improve their bone health, and overall improve kind of quality of life, strength, and everything that goes with it.
So it sounds amazing. It sounds like you're doing like this kind of holistic approach to care. But some of our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with bone health probably want to know, why is it that you're trying to tackle that issue? What is so important about bone health?
Yeah. So I suppose the thing with bone health is we all think of like our heart health and, wonder different things like our blood pressure. But I don't think many of us consider our bones, despite them literally holding us up. So 1 in 2 women and 1 in 5 men over 50 will break a bone due to poor bone health, which is a huge number. Osteoporosis is a silent disease, so you don't have symptoms. You don't feel it coming on like a lot of other diseases. And often the first sign for people is when they actually break a bone. And it's usually from a pretty small impact. They trip over and they break something. And these are known as fragility fractures. And some people might dismiss that, but they can have a huge impact on people's lives. You know, hip fractures, vertebral fractures. The most common fracture from osteoporosis is actually a vertebral fracture in your spine. But if you have a hip fracture, 30% of people with a hip fracture will die within the first year. It's really important to try and look after your bones and prevent yourself getting to that point where you fractures that might lead to pain and disability and kind of impact your independence and your quality of life.
Yeah, 1 in 2 women. That is
Yeah,
huge. I wasn't
it's a
actually aware of that myself.
huge number.
And is that, is being a woman quite a big risk factor in itself then for getting osteoporosis?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of risk factors. The biggest one is our genetics. Look, you just can't beat your genes. And kind of studies say up to 70% of our bone health is determined by our genetics. So the biggest risk factor to be aware of is your parents. Have they had a hip fracture? Have they got osteoporosis? Have you family history? But there's lots of risk factors with it. So being a woman is more of a risk factor. Osteoporosis affects both men and women, but disproportionately affects women. Having certain medical conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or celiac disease, certain medication like steroids. We've accelerated bone loss as women during the menopause years. So some women can lose as much as up to 20% of bone density in that kind of 5 to 7 years around menopause. And then other things like low weight, losing your period for an extended amount of time, over exercising, all these things can add into risk factors.
And I think you've mentioned about kind of losing your period for a while. We know that for some people that can be due to sometimes lifestyle factors as well. So, for example, having a particularly low BMI or kind of exercising excessively. Is that something that you've come across with the work that you're doing? Is that a risk factor for people with their bone health?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the in-person bone health clinics I ran, we saw a lot of young people, 20s and 30s, with stress fractures, low bone density, and a lot can be attributed to, low BMI, and over exercising. And look, sometimes it's unintentional. People increase their training and they don't realize how much they're doing, and your body kind of silently takes the energy from your bones or from your reproductive organs, hence, losing your period. So yeah, it's really important to know those kind of signs and risk factors. So the Royal Osteoporosis offer a really great tool. With the free tool, it's a risk checker. You can go on, it takes 2-3 minutes, and you can do a quick assessment and it'll tell you if you're at risk for developing osteoporosis. And then it's something you can bring into your GP and have a further discussion if you feel you are at risk with it.
Perfect. Is there anything, Jenni, that you think it would be helpful for listeners to know about if they want to have that conversation with their GP, if they're feeling a bit nervous about bringing the topic up, or if they feel like they might have one of the conditions that you've mentioned? How could they approach that discussion with their GP or their doctor?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think people can be very intimidated about bringing up different things, and they've other things going on. They might not be as aware of their bone health. But if you do think that you've got risk factors, so that tool, it provides you with an email and details to bring into your GP, but also it provides tips around talking to your GP about your risk factors and things you can do. But my personal advice as a physio who's treated people, and also myself when I'm going to appointments, is just write it down. Take a little piece of paper, write down, your concerns, your few tips, or what you perceive to be your risk factor, because it's very easy for us to say, oh, I'll remember, but in the heat of the moment, you don't remember those things. So, having it in front of you, being able to refer to it, saying, well, actually, I have X, Y, and Z, or my mum has osteoporosis, I think I should be checked. And then having that discussion with your GP about taking next step, whether it's getting a DEXA scan if it's appropriate, or looking at other risk factors or lifestyle factors with it.
Yeah, thank you. That's super useful. And I was thinking about what you were saying about coming across younger people with osteoporosis in your clinic. And again, that's not something people think about. They think about osteoporosis very much being something that their granny or their great granny might have. They don't really think about it being something that could affect younger people?
It's such a good point about young people, because there is a lot of myths and misconceptions about osteoporosis, that it only affects 90-year-old granny, but that's really not the case. We all reach our peak bone density by the age of 25 years old, which is so young. And then it kind of plateaus in our 30s, and then naturally it starts to decrease. But certain things speed up that process, and that's some of those risk factors. But it's so important from a young age to be aware of your bone health, because what you want to do is you want to try and put down as much bone in those building years up until you're 25 as you can. And think of it like your kind of reserve or your bank of bone then for going on later in life. So yeah, it's really important, but it is something that affects majority of people will be over 45 or 50 who present with osteoporosis, but you can have it at a younger age, particularly if you have significant risk factors. So it is something to be aware of.
And how do you put down bone? What are like the basic and simple things that we would do to think about putting down bone?
Yeah, so bone health is a very holistic approach. So if you're looking at building bone, particularly in our younger years, weight-bearing exercise and activity, so running around, impact training, that kind of jumping movement, strengthening. Now, it doesn't mean, a kid necessarily has to be in a gym lifting weights, but they're doing sport and they're challenging themselves into the resistance exercise, coming at it from a really good nutrition point of view and a well-rounded diet, that you're getting enough of your vitamins and your nutrients in, getting out and getting sunlight to get your vitamin D, all those kind of factors with it that really play into bone health. It is a really kind of holistic approach for it.
Yeah, it makes me think actually, because if you think about modern life, like what does modern life have nowadays in it, especially for young people? I look at my kids and I think we have to make so much effort to get them out to clubs, to doing sports, because actually it's very easy for them to be inside. So not outside in the sun, no vitamin D, sitting, staring at a screen, very much sedentary kind of lifestyle. And food, of course, it's a huge thing. Like nutrition is a huge thing. There's a big, there's a lot of talk now around what we're eating, and there's a big thing about ultra processed foods at the moment everywhere and in the press. So yeah, we really have to start actually thinking about it. And when we talk about food, like, are there certain foods that you think should be a regular part of somebody's diet that helps them to put down bone and to build bone?
Yeah. So the big thing with bone is you want to really try and get a good protein intake. Look, protein's important for so many different functions, but particularly your bone health and your musculoskeletal health as well. Obviously, people have different dietary requirements and different diets, but trying to get in as much kind of calcium and vitamin D. So like a good way to get that is dairy, but obviously if you don't take dairy, there's different ways that you can get that in. Leafy greens. If you're not getting it through nutrition, then looking to supplements. But a lot of people can get the nutrition they need through a really well-rounded diet. And being mindful of supplements. Not everyone needs to take, there's a bit of a myth that you have to take calcium if you have osteoporosis or bone health issues, but that's not necessarily the case. That's a conversation that if you're diagnosed, you should be having with your GP or with your healthcare professional.
And just kind of touching on that vitamin D aspect, Jenny, where I'm recording today, it's really grey, it's really gloomy outside. It's probably not going to get any better than labelling until next April, May time. So as you think, going outside, it's supposed to be one of the ways that we can get our vitamin D. It's not that great at the moment in the UK for that. So can you tell us a bit more about kind of recommendations for vitamin D in the UK? What are the things that people need to be thinking about to make sure that they're maximising their exposure?
Yeah, and literally, like you said, this time of year, there is recommendations from the NHS that people take vitamin D supplements. That can depend on the age and the person, and particularly if you're already diagnosed with osteoporosis. But being mindful of it, particularly in a dark and dreary UK winter. So yeah, if you can get out during the day and hope to get a bit of sunlight on your skin, but also if you need to supplement, absolutely supplement this time of year. The NHS always have recommendations of the required amount. If you're someone who's diagnosed with osteoporosis, have that conversation with your GP. You might need a higher dose if your levels are low, but also if your levels are fine, you don't want to over supplement, because there is studies that link too high supplementation of vitamin D and calcium that can actually increase falls. So it's just something to be aware of. That you stay on top of it, try and get things in through your diet, but if you need to, do take that little bit of extra help, particularly this time of year.
Yeah, not something we're worrying about too much in Cyprus. Me and my pineapple are okay.
Yeah.
not rubbing it in or anything.
Claudia's vitamin D levels are through the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just touching back on like the exercise element, I know there's a big kind of focus at the moment on resistance training and strength exercises. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that fits into kind of this picture about bone health?
Yeah. So strength exercise is honestly one of the best things you can do. There's so much evidence out there for exercise, particularly progressive resistance training, which essentially means, you don't have to start in a gym and lift really heavy weights. Your starting point might be a body weight squat or getting up out of the chair at home, but that it's over time you challenge yourself, you make it more difficult, whether that's doing an increased difficulty in a movement or an increased weight. But there's so much evidence there. So there's a lot of evidence behind exercise to reduce falls. So I think, exercise programs have been shown to reduce falls by kind of up to 25% in a year alone. There's exercise for improving bone health through strength, progressive resistance training, impact training. So yeah, it's a huge, huge part of bone health, musculoskeletal health, but also general. If you're doing strength exercise, you feel so much better. It has obviously positive impacts. There's so much out there now. Cardiac health. I think there's studies coming out on the link between, exercising and reducing your dementia risk. So it's just an all around brilliant thing to do.
We were talking about this in take one of
Yeah.
this podcast earlier. We were saying how I only started very recently. I turned 40 back in June, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a bit of strength training and start lifting some weights. And I went and spoke to the personal trainer, and I said, I don't want to be massive. And he laughed in my face and he said, there is no way you're going to do that. There's no way you're going to look like that, because that takes so much time and so much effort and, specific regime and a specific diet and everything else. And he again looked at me and went, that's not you.
It's such a misconception. I hear that all the time. I don't want to lift weights. I don't want to get bulky. Like you said, that takes years. Like bodybuilders put in daily training, hours on end, the amount of food, like you're not going to get there from doing resistance training twice a week to look after your bone health and your musculoskeletal health. It's a misconception that really needs to be broken, because all strength training is going to do is help you achieve your goals. It is.
Yeah. And I think our generation are sort of more okay with this, and are more thinking about strength training and are more thinking about lifting weights. And I certainly, I follow all my friends on Instagram, and I can see, people talking about how much they're pressing and how much they're deadlifting and everything else. So there's a real movement around that. But I wonder for the older generations, whether it's there really, I'm thinking of, say, my parents' generation or even beyond. I can't imagine my mum in a gym, like wanting to deadlift. So how can we encourage people who arguably are at a stage where they really would benefit from it massively to start doing an element of strength and resistance training?
Yeah, it's very true. And it's such a hard one, because I think while there definitely is a movement and people are more active, and you see a lot more people out running and in the gym, I do think a lot of people still feel excluded from that conversation. And I think it can be quite daunting. If you've never been in a gym before, it can be really intimidating. You look online and you see everyone deadlifting and lifting heavy weights, which is amazing, but you might feel, well, that's not me and I'm so far away from that. Or, if you've osteoporosis, you might feel, well, I've had a vertebral fracture. That doesn't relate to me, but it does. You can start anywhere. The great thing about exercise and working with somebody who really understands is you can start from your kitchen. You can just be doing a simple push-up on against the wall in your kitchen, and then you can progress that you're lifting some weights in a gym, but it's over time and it's tailored to you and your ability. And what's really important is that it's just you're challenging yourself consistently, that you're making things a little bit harder and harder. But it can be difficult for people to make that first step, but it is really, really worthwhile doing.
I think that's another nice thing that you've touched on there, Jenny, is I think sometimes when people think about strength training, they immediately think gym, bell, and they start to think about equipment as well. And so I'm just wondering, I mean, we are still in a cost of living crisis. We're also in a bit of a time resource crisis, some of us, if you are looking after parents or you're looking after children. Some people might feel that they're struggling for time. So you just mentioned about being in the kitchen there. Have you got any tips for people who feel like they either can't really afford kind of that gym membership right now, or they are struggling time-wise to be able to go and do that journey through the gym and back?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, you want to make this easy for people. And that's something we've really looked at with Building Bones, trying to fit into people's lives, not force this program upon them that they don't want to do and they don't have the time to do. So it's little things, you know, like with the impact or the jumping exercises, if you're able to do them, every time you boil the kettle and make a cup of tea, do 10 jumps. Or if you're doing balance exercise when you're brushing your teeth at night, you can stand on one leg and move the other leg around in a clock direction, or to challenge your balance skills. But then there's also strength exercise you can do at home. You've lots of tools at home. You can fill up a school bag with some books and use that as a weight on your back if you're doing some squats. Or I actually had a video of this yesterday. And put the
Get some
pineapple in a bag.
pineapples in your bag.
Exactly. Shopping bags. There's so much you can do. I actually did a video of this on my Instagram last night of exercise you can do at home. You can do carries, you know, improve your grip strength by walking up and down the corridor with shopping bags, or you can get some light little bands at home and you can do your banded rows and banded squats. So there is a lot you can do, particularly from a starting point, and you can progress them at home and make them more challenging. But yeah, that's a really good point, Emma, because people do need to know that you don't have to go out and get into a gym, that there is options for you wherever you are.
I think that is kind of introduced us quite nicely onto Building Bones. I think it'd be great, Jenni, if you could just talk to us a little bit more about Building Bones and some of the key features that are included in the app that you've been developing.
Yeah, so Building Bones, I had worked in bone health for over 5 years, doing kind of one-on-one programs for exercise, lifestyle, and people loved it and they got really good results. And I've been working with my mum over the years to improve her bone health after her diagnosis. And I wanted to take that, but basically make it into something that was accessible for people and that they could do from the comfort of their home or from wherever they wanted. So Building Bones is designed to personalize osteoporosis and bone health management for people. So it takes their medical history with an assessment. It does exercise assessments with them to try and get a detailed idea of where they're at, what their balance is currently like, what their strength is currently like, and have them involved in the process. Do they want to do this at home? Do they want to do it in a gym? And then building programs across exercise, education, nutrition, lifestyle, medication tracking, building in the tools that might help people improve their overall management, looking at it from a holistic point of view. And then also trying to build in a bit of community support as well. You know, that there's encouragement, that if my mum's doing the program, my aunt who's doing the program as well, they can like each other and encourage it while they're doing it. And that's an optional add-in for people if they'd like to do it. But trying to build that kind of community aspect around strength training and their management to encourage people to improve their bone health.
I think it was really nice that you just mentioned your lovely mum. So we have got, haven't we, a nice little voice clip from your lovely mum, just explaining about her own journey. So what we'll do is we'll play that now, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about your mum's reflections.
Hi, my name is Enda. I was diagnosed with osteoporosis in my late 50s and was completely shocked. I was a young, active woman, and I felt there really wasn't a holistic plan in place for me to improve my bone health. So I reached out to Jenni. Jenni got me started on a program which included nutrition, lifestyle changes, and most importantly, exercise. That meant me starting in a gym and lifting weights for the first time, something I had never done. And I was completely shocked having to do this, and it was alien to me. But thankfully, I embraced it. I am now 64, and not only have I improved my bone density, I also feel stronger, fitter, and I'm pain-free. Now, simple things like carrying heavy shopping bags or suitcases is absolutely no problem. My balance is better and my golf has improved. But most importantly, I feel better overall and I feel stronger. I know starting weights can be daunting, but my advice would be to any woman, it's the best thing you can do. And it's so important because it's something we all should be doing and doing right into our 70s and 80s so we can stay strong and fit.
So Claudia and I love this clip from your mum because, as we've alluded to before, we really like the idea that she's empowering people to do strength training, particularly that post-menopause age group. And we feel like it's nice that it sounds like that she's become a lot more confident from doing her strength training, and that it's helped her more kind of with some of the physical tasks that she was doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and as Mum says in the voice note, you know, the gym and strength training was completely alien to my mum. If you had told her before she'd be in a gym lifting weights and deadlifting, she'd have said not a chance. But she really embraced it, and she's such an advocate now for bone health. You know, if you talk to Mum on the golf course or anywhere, she'll be asking you your risk factors. She'll be telling you to go get a DEX. If any of her friends listen to this, they'll laugh because they'll relate. You know, she's such an advocate, and she's such an advocate for, you know, despite it being difficult and it might be a bit scary going to a gym for the first time, just do it. Because the benefits of exercise, as we kind of covered earlier, it's not just improving your bone density. Like, that's amazing, and it's amazing what she's done with her whole program over the last few years. But it's the overall improvement, you know, to your confidence and your mental health and your ability to do day-to-day things, picking up the kids or throwing your suitcase overhead in the plane, not waiting for the person behind you. All those things, so important. And again, it's never too late to start. If you are sitting here at 90 listening to this podcast, looking at the lovely pineapple, and you want to start weight training, great, go for it. You know, it is literally, it's never too late for you to make improvements and to take control of kind of your bone health, your musculoskeletal health with strength training.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was lovely listening to her, and her little nod to golf and how it helped her on the golf course. I thought it was really sweet. That's really lovely.
Yeah. But that's as well, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with the application. You know, we've built in what are your goals, because it's important that you're building for what people want, because obviously if people want to improve their bone density, great, but people want that to be related into something they do in a day-to-day basis. And, you know, we're trying to improve outcomes with decreasing falls risk and fracture risk and improving bone health. But it's really important that people notice the difference themselves. They're more confident, they can do things easier. It makes their life easier in some way, whether that's jumping up out of the chair without using any hands, or whether that's lifting something heavy when you're out gardening. You know, it's really important to personalize that and listen to the users and kind of build them into the journey as well.
Yeah, that's so true. And I have a question about DEXA scans, or not about DEXA scans, but about bone density and then exercise. If you were to have a DEXA scan, which is a scan that tells you what your bone density is, and it was to show that your bone density is on the lower end, and you were then to go and do an exercise program, you know, start doing some resistance training, some strength training. If you were then to repeat that scan, would your bone density go up? Or once your bone density is where it is, it does not really move. It just stays where it is, and you do your best to maintain it.
Yeah, so you can change your bone density. And I think Mum alludes to that in hers. So Mum has changed hers for what's considered the osteoporosis range back into the osteopenia range.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look, when people are diagnosed with low bone density, whatever end of the scale they're at, it's the conversation then you have with your GP or with your specialist. And, you know, certain people, if you're at a certain fracture risk or if you're at a certain level, you know, there's a conversation around medication and risk and stuff to build into it. But we've seen, or I've seen, plenty of people change their scores on a DEXA scan. And yes, you could do that with exercise and with different things. It just depends on you and your individual. Now, obviously, there's situations, you know, if people are losing bone for a medical reason, even if they're doing things like strength training, they may not see immediate gains, and strength takes time. You're not going to start a program and in 6 weeks see changes in your DEXA scan. You know, the clinical studies like the Lift More trial and those that are quoted a lot, like they're 8 months long. You know, it's really a good year of kind of consistent progress. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can miss a week here and there, but it's that continual progressive exercise is where we see the changes with it.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And I've got this interest more looking into preventive health and what can we do earlier on rather than later when problems really begin, when we get to a point where we're really struggling and it potentially even becomes more expensive to solve the issue. Is there that you could do when you're younger that would set you on a good path, basically, as you get to that age 25, 30s, 40s, 50s? What would you recommend that people focus on?
Yeah, it is. There's such a need for that shift between kind of from reactive to preventative health. And, we've amazing services in the UK with fracture liaison services, but it's secondary fracture prevention. So it's once someone has already broken a bone. People should be trying to take preventative steps to prevent themselves breaking that bone in the first place. So with young people, we alluded to earlier, weight bearing exercise, nutrition, trying to really build that bank of bone that you have as much bone as possible when you reach your peak bone mass by the age of kind of around 25. But then throughout life, at any point, taking up strength training, being mindful of nutrition or supplements if you need them on top of it. And then paying more attention at certain times. So in the menopause, you have that accelerated bone loss over those years. So being really mindful of that and really considering that those are years that you should be trying to do additional things in your life to try and get on top of that and slow that bone loss or try and build bone while you're doing it. But yeah, it's a hard one. Can we go into schools and tell them how important their bone health is and make them jump up and down before each lesson to try and get that impact in? I don't know what the answer is in terms of that. That would be in an ideal scenario.
I wanted to ask you a question about pregnancy. Does pregnancy impact your bone density, and do you lose bone density the more pregnancies that you have?
Yeah, so look, there is something called pregnancy-related osteoporosis. It's quite rare, but you do see it, and you can see people having fractures either after they've given birth or during pregnancy a lot of the time, vertebral fractures, but that's not very common. But generally, obviously, when you're pregnant, there is an increased demand. Your body uses more calcium while you're pregnant, and then if you're breastfeeding afterwards. Again, really important to keep in line with guidelines of what's recommended for calcium intake while you're pregnant, because naturally, you're supporting another little human. Naturally, you have to give part of that. Typically, the bone loss that you experience within pregnancy, you rebound back to your natural bone where you were after you stop. But again, there's lots of upcoming evidence coming out about the benefits of strength training during pregnancy and things as well. Again, there's lots that you can continue to do.
Yeah, that's a super important point. Well, on two parts. First of all, I think a bit of a public service announcement from the ex-obs and gynae reg in the room. Make sure you're taking your vitamin D. Speak to your midwife about vitamin D as well, because it's so important in pregnancy. And also, I think I've recently had a baby. I say recently, 10 months ago.
Yeah.
And I think there is that kind of reservation when you're pregnant about exercising, or certainly within that community of, can I exercise? What can I do? And I think that that's something that some people are fortunate enough to be able to afford to see PTs who specialize in perinatal exercise or postpartum exercise, but not everyone has got access to that. And so have you got any kind of tips for them?
Yeah, look, there's really good resources online. While I specialize in bone health, I've an interest across the whole women's health spectrum, and I follow a lot of pelvic health physios and pages online, and there's some really good research and people posting evidence-based content out there about what's safe and what you can do. So yeah, there is lots of resources available for people in that area. In terms of bone health specifically, those exercises are, again, there's a lot of available resources across like the Royal Osteoporosis Society. I've set up my Instagram, The Bone Physio, to try and give out educational information for people that they can access as well. So yeah, look, it's a whole different podcast topic, accessing information online and what's good information, what isn't, but trying to follow reputable people who post evidence-based content is really important, and it can be a really good access for people at home who may not be able to access other services.
Another question that I had was around GLP-1s and around weight loss and how that affects bone health. I don't know what your thoughts are really around that, if there's any new research that's coming out about this.
Yeah, look, it's such a topic that's in the news all the time at the moment and talked about. Obviously, research is emerging because it's a relatively new topic, but there is indications in research that weight loss with GLP-1s can cause bone loss, particularly if it's uncontrolled or rapid weight loss. with it. Obviously, time will tell in terms of studies and what we see with it. But the big thing is if you are trying to achieve weight loss with whatever way, it is so important to keep atop of resistance training. It's really one of the main things that you can do, that you should be exercising for strength and bone health and muscle strength, that, you know, you should be incorporating that you're not just doing cardio and things that you feel will aid the weight loss journey, you really have to be really mindful and on a really structured program to try and ensure that you maintain lean muscle mass and your bone health, because there's other things that it can add into, you know, things down the line, like not just osteoporosis, but sarcopenia with muscle loss, or osteosarcopenia where you've osteoporosis and sarcopenia. Yeah, it's a really big topic, and I think there will be a lot of research coming out about it. But my advice would be to keep on top of your resistance training, and make sure that, you know, you talk to your healthcare professional about it, that you're doing it safely.
Yeah, that's another module for building bones for the app.
That is a whole other
That's all.
module and section. Yeah. And look, it is, you know, time changes and stuff, that is potentially something we'll have to look at building in. And again, if users have that feedback and that's something down the line, then that is something we might have to look at. But yeah, absolutely.
So you kind of alluded to it. I mean, obviously, misinformation is a big thing, and that's a whole podcast in itself. I think one of the nice things is when you are creating an app, is that you are kind of the master of that ship, aren't you? You're in charge of what information is going on there. And we can tell, Jenni, you know, you already mentioned some very comprehensive studies in bone health. One of the things that you mentioned before, there's just a couple of things I think it would be nice for us to talk about and explore, is the community element. And so it'd be nice to know what that means. How does that translate into like the product or the app that the user is interacting with?
Yeah, so a big thing I found from doing the program with people on a one-to-one basis, or even the feedback that we've done to date with developing the app and working with people, is people often feel quite lost and they don't feel that supported when they're diagnosed. And because there's stigma still there that, you know, only women get it, or it's only an older woman's disease, you know, people can feel like, oh, I don't want to tell anyone I've osteoporosis. And that shouldn't be the case. You know, it affects both men and women. And as we said, it can affect young people as well. So having that support during that time is really important. From kind of the user feedback, it really came through of, you know, people want a community, they want access to support, but also they don't want to be overwhelmed. They don't want huge amounts of information and threads and posting. So it's something we've tried to build into Building Bone. So we have that community aspect where you can choose to add friends, and you can like and encourage and engage with their activity. And you can have a competition. My mum and my aunt can compete of, oh, well, she did 10 stands out of the chair, but she did 15. And it just builds that enjoyment into it, and that support as well, because I think that's there in a lot of apps like Strava and some other brilliant apps. But I think sometimes people, if you're strength training and you're not using an app like that, you can kind of be excluded from the conversation. So it's building that in as well, so people are included in that.
You've touched on user feedback there. Have you utilised that much in the developing of Building Bones? Have you tried to work with your target audience to try and create something that is something that's going to be useful and well received by them?
Yeah, absolutely. Co-designing with our future users and with other people who engage with the app, GPs and stuff, is so important to me. I did a master's in digital health last year, and I think before that I had thought, you know, well, obviously you get people involved, but I kind of hadn't appreciated the extent to which people need to be involved in the conversation. So we've spent over the last year and a half, we've been doing user feedback. So, I mean, it's user feedback from the last 5 years doing the program with people one-to-one, but we've spoken to over 160 people in the last year and a half and had them involved in various regards of, you know, feedback, what they want to see. We've spoken to GPs as well. We've spoken to 50 GPs. So it's really trying to make sure that we really understand their needs, their pain points, and then address those for them. But it's never ending. So if anyone's listening to this and they want to get involved and give me feedback or be involved in a session or when the app is ready, absolutely, I would love that. It's so important, and I think it's something that'll never end. You know, we'll be doing this feedback, and every iteration when we launch, we'll have people giving us feedback on it. And that's so important to me, that we constantly listen to our users and create something that makes their life easier and actually adds real value and improves their outcomes, because that's what I'm building the app for, that there's no point in doing it otherwise.
Yeah, it's very true. It's one of the biggest things that I learned in health tech was that if you're building in something that's direct to consumer, you need to work so closely with those individuals, and you need to just listen to their feedback and take it in, because that's what's going to make it better and better and more useful for those people. So it's super valuable to get that input.
And like as well in health, trust is so important. You can't just throw up an app that isn't safe with their data and all these different aspects of it. You really need to make sure that it does what it says for them, that it's in line with regulation and data protection, and because you have to build that trust and that relationship with your users and make sure you're kind of going on that journey with them. Otherwise, what's the point in creating the app if you don't want it to benefit people and really kind of improve their outcomes? And for me, it's working with patients like my mum, creating a tool for her that makes it easier and that would have made her journey easier when she initially got diagnosed. That she could have just downloaded something from the App Store and gone, you know what, this gives me pointers and helps me in my direction of where I'm going.
I'm sure, Jenni, as well, some of our listeners, their ears will have pricked up then when they've heard about, you mentioned about the masters. So we've probably got a few listeners on here who are in the middle of their own co-founder journey, or they might have some ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with founding Building Bones?
Yeah, so I've kind of touched on it, but I was working as a physio when my mum was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and then I started setting up bone health services. So I've been working with people for 5-6 years doing this program on a one-to-one basis, and I loved it. But people were coming in, I was giving them huge information over an hour, they were going away, I was typing up a 20-page PDF, sending it to them. They don't want that, I don't want that, so I kind of was like, how can I create a tool that makes this easy for them and for me, and they can get the information they need, but in an accessible way at home, and they're not spending a fortune coming into me every week to do it. So I wanted to create a tool, but I really didn't know where to start. So I saw the masters in UCL, so it's digital health and entrepreneurship, and it was what I felt I needed, an all-rounded master. So it gave you, finance, business, but also all those key components of health tech, co-designing, research, making sure this is an actual really valuable tool that does what it says, that you're not just creating a rubbish app that won't do anything and creating to a never-ending amount of apps that are out there. And for me, it really gave me the confidence to progress. Doing all the user testing, I built a little prototype myself initially to test with people, and then moving forward with that. So that really helped me with my journey, and giving the confidence to do it. But for people listening, you don't need to go back and do a master's. That was my personal experience and what I wanted. There's so much resources online now. There really is. There's some brilliant people putting out content online. And I'd say the biggest thing is always be open to feedback. It is a never ending journey. Your users are the most important people. Don't forget that. Patient public involvement, or the people that you're creating the tool for, and getting GPs involved and specialists and everyone. And there's so much information out there with it. I think I touched as well earlier on, shared decision making, how important it is that people are involved in that conversation. So it's really important.
And I think you're also currently doing the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Program, which I'm sure there are a few people who are getting ready to prep their applications for the next round. What's been your experience so far, and is it something that you'd recommend?
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm on this year's cohort. So it just started there in May. And they have the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Program, which is open to any staff who work at the NHS, whether you're patient facing or not. But they also have the Patient Entrepreneur Program and the Dementia Innovators Program. So if you're sitting at home thinking, well, I'm not a physio, or I'm not a doctor, maybe that's not for me. That's not true. Patients, their voice, and carers and people who are involved on the outskirts or around a disease, they're so important, and their voice and their experiences can really create change. So if you're sitting at home and you feel like, well, I actually would like to change this, why don't you look at applying? There's so many different ways you can create impact. For me, the big thing has been kind of the networking and the people that you get exposure to and meet. It really helps you stress your idea, create changes, look at your company structure and think, well, could I do this differently? And the great thing about the program is you don't have to be at a certain stage. You can be at idea stage and quite early on, or you can be really advanced and you can have pilots and users done, but you're looking at kind of thinking, well, how do I integrate this into the NHS? How can I create change or move from a reactive to a preventative model? There's really great options and it does give you a lot of great exposure.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I love the sound of that. Like, why should it just be open to doctors and physios? Why not people with lived experience who, deal with these challenges day in, day out? They might have an absolutely brilliant, fabulous idea that they can bring forwards and have their ideas sort of brought to life and supported. It sounds excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, where can listeners learn more about Building Bones, Jenni?
So you can find us on our website at buildingboneshealth.com, or I have launched Instagram despite my initial horror of launching social media. I am giving out advice around bone health and exercise. So the Bone Physio on Instagram, or whoever chooses TikTok, they also go on TikTok. So yeah, you can find it there, or anyone who wants to reach out to me. If you want to get involved as a patient in the process and have a say in how the app is designed, or want to be an early tester, if you're a doctor or anyone who's interested in the process, I am always open to feedback. Or if people want, my experience of generally moving from clinician to health tech founder or the NHS program, reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always available for a chat.
Oh, that's lovely. Thanks, Jenni. I mean, I think some take homes for me from this conversation, Claudia, have probably been about preparing for that consultation with your GP, not being afraid to go and kind of ask about screening, making sure you're empowered and doing the Osteoporosis Society risk assessment before when you go. I think that's a really great resource that we can be signposting people to. How about you?
And for me, I would say it's probably thinking about how we can impact our bone health from an increasingly younger age. And we should probably be thinking about it more, and we should be considering it more for our children as well. And so yeah, it's been really great food for thought. Thank you so much, Jenni.
Yeah, no, not at all. And look, I'll just finish with, it is never too late to start. And there's always something you can do. If it's just jumping up and down, making your cup of coffee, or little things that you can do in your day that change. If it's tomorrow, today, just start and you won't regret it. There's so many benefits.
Fab. But they are some great sentiments to finish on, I think.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jenni, for take 2.
Yeah, not at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. We love having you with us on this journey through women's health and innovation.
Follow us on Instagram at the Pink Pineapple Podcast for clips, conversations, and the latest in women's health and femtech.
We'll see you next week. Same pineapple, new topic. Everything we talk about on the Pink Pineapple Podcast is here to inform and inspire, but it's not a substitute for professional medical advice. If you're worried about your health, please reach out to your GP or healthcare provider.